Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of Complex Like Wine, the podcast where we talk complicated things and improve over time just like wine does. I hope you're having a wonderful week, a wonderful day, whenever time you're listening. And this week we have Malorie with us today. She is going to touch on with neurodiversity, neurodivergence. We're going to talk a little bit all about that. And so, yeah, Malorie, thank you for being on the podcast.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
No, yeah, I'm super excited. No, we were talking about you've been traveling a lot, so you've been having a really fun summer, which is great to hear.
Yeah. I've been working on the road this summer and just kind of being away from my regular environment has been really inspirational, like creatively. So I've been doing a lot of writing. I've been doing a lot of work on different projects, and I'll get into all of those. But yeah, it's been a really great time.
That's good. I'm so happy to hear. Well, I'll let you introduce yourself and kind of share with the podcast and the listeners why we're here today and what we're going to be touching in on.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Malorie Joy, and I am a career coach and neurodiversity consultant. And what that means is I help bridge the gap between organizations and their neurodivergent employees. So neurodiversity is a concept that touches on a variety of different ways that a person's brain might work. Some of these might be like autism, ADHD, dyslexia, dyscalculia, and a variety of other just neurological differences that people may have in the population. And for me personally, my experience has really been shaped by my own personal journey getting diagnosed with autism and ADHD in my late 20s and how that has manifested in not only my personal life, but also my work life and career. And so earlier this year in 2023, I launched my career coaching and consulting business. And what I want to do is I want to help people like myself navigate through their professional and personal lives so that they can be the most fulfilled. And throughout this career, I will continue to pursue neurodiversity advocacy and commit to creating work environments where everyone feels like they belong.
That's amazing. Can you take us back to maybe some of the earliest memories you had where you could probably look back and realize like, oh, that was either the ADHD or the autism symptoms starting to show, or just like as an adolescent going into adulthood before being diagnosed, realizing like there might have been a gap between neurotypical and yourself?
Yeah, there are a couple like stories that really stick out in my brain. But I think it's really interesting to look at it across the lifespan. So as a kid, I was very um, very like introspective, very much in my own little world, and I developed the skills that I needed to blend in with my peers, but it never really felt natural. So, this word that we often use in autism communities is masking, where you kind of play a different character in order to fit in a little bit better with the people that you're around. And so I think that my early experiences masking and kind of learning, oh, okay, make this expression or say these words in this order with this intonation, that kind of taught me the skills that I needed to just kind of like fly under the radar and blend in with my neurotypical peers. But what is difficult about masking is that it leads to burnout, and it leads to feeling like you don't really know who you are at the core of it all, because every interaction is just so calculated. So those experiences I had growing up really gave me a lot of skills that helped me succeed, but also it's kind of a double-edged sword there is it filled me with like just a lot of anxiety and a lot of stress, like bubbling up under the surface. And so um, whenever I got into the adult world in my early 20s, I felt completely lost. And the transition into working and into kind of managing your life as a grown up and managing your own relationships was just a lot for me. And so I struggled a lot with anxiety and depression in my early 20s, and kind of sent me down a path where I started going to therapy, and I started to um, look really introspectively at myself and ask questions, and led me to getting my diagnoses for autism and ADHD at age 27. And so, yeah, I just think it's really interesting to look at the entire evolution of how my experiences have made me into the person I am today.
Mm-hmm. Would Has either autism or ADHD been more difficult for you, or when you got your diagnosis, it was a little bit more kind of relieving to know what was going on? That way, you had a better idea to go about it through therapy or just through your own work and healing.
Yeah, that's a great question. It Getting the diagnoses, it gives you a framework to view yourself through. Um, so when I read my diagnostic report that I got with my autism diagnosis, it was like 20 pages of just really interesting insights about myself, and I loved like looking at it from that angle because it kind of was, first of all, like it satisfied like in my own curiosity. Like I love trying to understand human behavior and like why we do the things that we do. But also it kind of like made me feel a little bit like uh, free a little bit, and I was able to kind of take the burden off of myself for you know just 27 years of making mistakes and reading situations wrong, and who all kinds of things where um, when I was growing up, I thought that there was just something so different about me, and I didn't fit in, and I didn't understand why. And the diagnosis, it gave me the framework for understanding why. That, and of course, working with my therapist and reading a ton of information out there, it really just kind of sent me down a path where I um, fell in love with the topic, and I decided to enroll in graduate school to become a therapist myself.
So I was just about to ask you if through your journeys, what led you into going into like therapy and now your own business. So do you think if you had never gotten your diagnosis, if you would ever gone that route? Or do you think it was like purely from point A to point B, just the way that things played out, that's what got you there?
Yeah, no, I mean, I definitely think that I wouldn't have gone down that route if I hadn't um, taken the like if I hadn't taken therapy seriously. And I put a lot of effort into understanding myself, and um, I've had a lot of amazing therapists over the years, but um, I think if I hadn't done all of this like deep diving to understand myself better, I would have continued down a path, working a corporate job and probably just burning out more and more until, well, I guess I would have had to start going to therapy eventually. It's just a matter of how burned out I would have been. whenever I started. So yeah, it definitely was a big impact.
Mm-hmm. So now with your business and what you do, what are some of the topics or things that you see the most that you work on with your clients?
Yeah, so what what I do with my business, I kind of look at it from two different lenses. One is the individual lens. So how can I help individual job seekers or perhaps people who are um, struggling to find the right job for them or something where they feel like they could use a little bit of assistance. For example, asking for accommodations at work. That might be something where you just want to get on a call with somebody for an hour or so, make a plan, and decide how you're going to go about that. That would be something I help with as well. On the other side of things, I work directly with companies where I educate them about neurodiversity and the benefits that it brings to an organization working with neurodiverse teams, and also educate them on some ways that they can make their organizations more inclusive and offering accommodations that are just not really a huge uh, deal to implement, but can be a huge benefit for not only their neurodiverse employees, but like the neurotypical ones as well. Everybody can benefit.
Mm-hmm. What have been some things that have been maybe surprising for you on this journey from getting your diagnoses to now where you're at?
Yeah, something that's kind of surprising is just the lack of information out there on neurodiversity and especially neurodiversity in the workplace. You see in a lot of places a focus on DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Is that something that you are familiar with in other contexts?
Honestly, no. So I would love to hear more in depth about it.
Yeah. You so in a corporate world, a trend that we're seeing is like a focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so that typically applies to things like race, ethnicity, gender, religion, like gender identity, all kinds of visible characteristics. And what I'm finding is often left out is okay, well, what about the invisible characteristics? Like, what about people who think a little bit differently or who process the world in a different way than everybody else is? Um, and what I've found is that there's just kind of a general lack of information out there, even though the neurodiverse population is actually quite large. It includes just a lot of different categories, and when we strive to make our workplaces more inclusive, everybody else benefits.
Mm-hmm. So for people listening, what like let's say you were talking with a business and kind of explaining them like neurodiversity in the workplace and just what are characteristics of someone that's maybe neurodivergent and all that. For people listening, what would be some of the explanations that you would give to a business?
Yeah. Well, so my philosophy on it is that with neurodiversity, you have to be sensitive to disclosure and who people who would self-identify themselves. So it's um, you don't want to make assumptions about people, and nobody appreciates assumptions being made. So when I got my diagnoses, I actually decided to tell my whole firm that I was working for at the time. It was about 100 people or so. And I got like a really positive and um, like really warm reception to it. And I really appreciated the way that people reached out and let me know like, hey, thanks for sharing. What can I do to um, make it easier for me and you to work together? And I think that's a really great place to start. And usually it's not something that is hugely difficult to change. So, for example, for me, when we're talking about a to-do list or we're working on a project, just simple bullet points are kind of how I process information whenever I'm reading. Um, there's also just other like little accommodations too. Like for example, people that I work with closely know to be just very direct in their speech and try to not use um, like ambiguous language so that we can ensure that we're all on the same page. And none of those things are very difficult to do. So it's kind of like at the interpersonal level is the place where a lot of it starts, and it doesn't have to be anything large scale.
Mm-hmm. Was it difficult for you to share with your firm? Like, was there any kind of like thought process or maybe a game plan that you had to prepare for to do it? Or did you just know this was just part of your journey that you needed to go through and wasn't a big deal?
Yeah, I mean that's a really good question. And the decision of like whether to disclose at work or not is one that a lot of people have to make for themselves. For me, like uh, I talked to my therapist a lot about it. And we kind of weighed the pros and cons, and some of the things I considered were like, okay, well, if I tell people, hey, I'm autistic, I have ADHD, here are just some ways that you and I can work better together. Probably that will improve my like productivity at work, and it'll probably improve a lot of things and hopefully lower my stress levels as well. But on the other hand, maybe people start treating me different, and so these are all like pros and cons that you have to weigh. And I mean, I would highly recommend working with um, a coach or a therapist or somebody on bouncing those ideas. But but yeah, I think that for the people who they're in a safe place to disclose about their neurodiversity, like I think that that is always a great thing because the more representation and visibility we have out there, the more people are going to understand us better, and the more we can kind of bridge these gaps between communication.
Mm-hmm. Are there any things off the top of your head that we haven't touched on yet, or you would want to go in deeper that would help people listening merge the gap of communication, or just certain things that you've noticed now in your profession that most people are not aware of or don't know and would be good to be educated or just to start opening up the conversation on?
Yeah. Um, so I'm doing a lot of writing on how how professionals in our lives can be more empathetic to um, neurodivergent people. And so one of the things that was challenging for me a couple of years ago was I was trying to find a new therapist because I had moved states. And it was really difficult to find one who I felt like understood me as an adult and a autistic adult. Um, and didn't have preconceived notions on what that would look like for me based on an understanding of like autism in children.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something that I'm working on putting together some articles on how different professionals in our lives can interact with us better. And I think about this in terms of, not just therapists and not just your boss at work, but like um, healthcare providers and um, emergency responders and college professors or whoever might be in your life at a certain time. I'm working on creating education that will help them understand how neurodiversity presents for different people.
I really love that. I recorded an episode earlier on this season with my mentor, and her son has autism. And so her and I have talked about from her perspective, as a parent, trying to like educate other people on, the preconceived notions of what people assume in autism, especially because, the from my understanding, what I've been told, like the diagnostics, like, is all based on a little boy and maybe the symptoms they may show versus, you as a 27-year-old adult woman being diagnosed, that people were not looking for maybe the certain symptoms that you would show, but looking more focused on like a very narrow definition of what it looks like. And so would you say that's still very like accurate, and like for you was that hard?
Really, that's always my fear whenever I'm um, disclosing my autism to another person in my life is that they're gonna come into it with a preconceived notion, and um, I think just like having more visibility, and we have started to get some visibility in the last couple of years. There is a really amazing podcast series called The Loudest Girl in the World by Lauren Ober, which is like um, a super funny story about, it's got like kind of like a coming of age story about a 40 something woman who gets diagnosed with autism. So I love seeing more of that representation in the media for us, because I feel like all I really want is just to be understood. And it's really hard sometimes um, to have to go so far to help people understand you. I want to be understood
Mm-hmm.
more readily.
Right. Ooh, so for now with ADHD, because on the podcast I haven't touched on ADHD really yet. What could you share with maybe people that are aware of it but don't really know what it entails, or maybe from your personal experience, what were ways that it presented itself that after you got your diagnosis you realized like, okay, here's ways I can adjust and tweak things so it's more manageable?
Yeah. I mean, ADHD is a little bit different, and there's like there's a lot of different ways that people manage it. I personally tried a couple of different drugs before landing on the one that works for me, which is Adderall. Um, I know a lot of people like have a want to say like a little bit of a stigma against taking Adderall, and because it does have like a potential to be abused. But I have to say, like, ever since getting my diagnosis and managing it, I feel like I have like calm in my brain is the best way to describe it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's really just made like a huge impact in my life and my ability to um, not just focus on like work, but also personal like passion projects too that I've been putting off for so long. So it's been a really big life changer. I don't
There.
know if I don't know if you're allowed to technically put that out there, because it's like it's like advertising a drug.
Oh, no, no, no. Yeah, I was gonna say what before I started the podcast and before I started therapy, I was definitely more eerie on, antidepressants, anti-anxiety medication, because that's what I struggled with. But it was just because I didn't know. And since going through therapy, since starting the podcast, and now talking and connecting with different people, walks of life, and the way medication has helped them. And now on the podcast, I'm trying to help with like the stigma. Like, no, if something works for you, why would you not take it? And trying to also get away from the stigma of like, especially with like Adderall, where like it can be abused. Especially, like I graduated college 3 years ago, and so I knew a lot of kids in college who were taking Adderall just to take Adderall, and so trying to get that mindset off of it away. It's like, no, the way it's intended to be used and like for people like you that are benefiting and it's life changing is just like now bringing that awareness out of taking away the stigma of like, if you need help, don't be afraid to ask for help. If you need to take Adderall, you need to take medication, SSRIs, whatever it is, like, why would you not take it?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I absolutely agree. Like, I think we're starting to get to a really good place where mental health has just been more of a forefront of the conversation, which I think is really exciting because, like, therapy is a amazing tool. It's one of many tools, but it's a great tool that you can use to understand yourself better and develop like healthy coping mechanisms for your life. And that's been, I would say therapy has been one of the biggest game changers for me in terms of just how I feel about myself and how I just manage the world around me.
Mm-hmm. And it's crazy too because, we have all these different type of coping mechanisms, and how someone copes and whatever tools and mechanisms they use is going to look different for somebody else. And so I've learned through different guests on the podcast or even myself, like again, taking away that stigma or that pre-assumption of, oh, you're taking this for that. Like, okay, well, maybe I need to take this for my thing and you don't. Like, there's not one shoe fits all type of situation. And so it makes me happy to hear that, Adderall really helps you. And that's amazing because that's, what it's was created to do. It's working for you, and that's what matters. Is there anything else you wanted to share with the podcast or any other topics you wanted to touch on?
Oh, I don't think so. I think we covered a lot of it.
Yeah, yeah, I think so too. Was there any plugins for yourself that you wanted to include, whether it's social media, your business? Bless you. Anything that you wanted to plug in for yourself?
Yeah, so if you go to my website, it's just maloriejoy.com. From there, you can kind of read a little bit about the different services that I offer um, for individuals, neurodivergent professionals, and also for companies. And I do things like team workshops, I do trainings, talks, but I also offer one on one coaching, resume reviews, like strategy sessions for planning your job search, all pretty much um, any service that is along those lines. I would love to help, or shoot me an email and we can discuss ways that I can potentially help you or your organization.
Perfect. Yeah, guys, I'm gonna have all her stuff in the bio, so her website. That way you can go check it out, and that way if you need some of Mallory's help, you can book directly with her. Thank you so much for spending time and chatting with me on the podcast.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. Well, guys, I think we'll wrap it up here. This was a really good one. It was like we powered through a lot of questions, but we touched a lot of ground. So this was a good episode. Yeah. Thanks, guys, for tuning to this episode. Share with friends and family. Like, rate, subscribe, whatever platform you're listening on. You know what to do. I love you all, and have a good rest of your day. All right, bye, guys.